What if the most ordinary objects around you held secrets from a world long forgotten? Think about the cup you drink from every morning, the ring you twist absent-mindedly, or even the walking stick leaning by your door. These everyday items might seem unremarkable, but centuries ago, they could have been masterpieces of deception, hiding astonishing ancient devices right under the noses of kings and conquerors. Picture this, a simple wooden comb, its teeth perfectly spaced, but hidden between them lies a tiny map etched in silver, guiding fugitives through hostile lands. Or a child's toy, hollowed out to conceal a message that could change the fate of an empire. These weren't just clever tricks, they were lifelines, tools of survival crafted by minds so brilliant, their inventions slipped through history unnoticed. Until now, for thousands of years, empires rose and fell, their secrets buried in time. But some of the most extraordinary clues weren't hidden in treasure vaults or locked behind palace walls. They were disguised as mundane objects, passed hand to hand in plain sight. Imagine the courage it took to carry a seemingly innocent oil lamp, knowing its base unscrewed to reveal a compartment holding forbidden texts, or the ingenuity of a musician whose flute doubled as a coded messaging system, its notes spelling out coordinates for safe passage. These devices weren't just hidden, they were woven into the fabric of daily life, so perfectly camouflaged that even the most suspicious rulers never suspected a thing. How did they do it, and why did so many of these contraptions vanish from history, only to resurface centuries later in the hands of unsuspecting collectors or archaeologists? That's the journey we're starting today, a dive into 28 of history's most ingenious hidden devices, each one a testament to human creativity under pressure. From smuggled religious relics disguised as kitchenware to weapons masquerading as jewelry, these artifacts tell a story of desperation, brilliance, and sometimes sheer audacity. By the time we're done, you'll see the past, and maybe even your own belongings, in a whole new light, because the most extraordinary secrets aren't always locked away. Sometimes they're right in front of us, waiting for someone to look closely enough. So let's begin. One of the most jaw-dropping examples of hidden ancient technology wasn't buried in a tomb or locked in a temple. It was found at the bottom of the sea, encrusted in coral and rust. The Antikythera Mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece over a century ago, looked like little more than a lump of bronze at first glance. But when researchers carefully cleaned it, they uncovered a masterpiece of engineering, dozens of interlocking gears precisely calibrated to track the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. This wasn't just a tool, it was a portable observatory, small enough to conceal inside a wooden crate, yet sophisticated enough to predict eclipses decades in advance. Why would someone need to hide such a groundbreaking device? Because knowledge was power, and in the ancient world, empires tightly controlled who had access to celestial secrets. Imagine being a ship's navigator in the 1st century BCE, relying on stars to guide you across treacherous waters. With this mechanism, you could bypass royal astronomers and calculate lunar cycles yourself, avoiding storms or planning raids under the cover of darkness. The gears inside were so finely crafted that modern engineers struggled to replicate them until the invention of precision clockwork nearly 2,000 years later. Some scholars believe it even accounted for tiny irregularities in the moon's orbit, a concept so advanced it wouldn't be rediscovered until the Renaissance. What's truly haunting is how much we might have lost. The Antikythera Mechanism survived purely by chance, preserved in salt water while countless others crumbled to dust. Who built these devices? How many were smuggled past customs officials? Their true purpose disguised as cargo or religious artifacts? The answers may lie in the wreckage of other sunken ships or tucked away in forgotten manuscripts. But one thing's certain, this wasn't just a calculator. It was a revolution in a box, proof that ancient innovators could outthink empires with nothing but bronze and brilliance. Hidden in plain sight among the jingling coins of ancient Rome was a masterpiece of covert engineering, the Firestarter Denarius. At first glance, it looked identical to every other silver coin circulating through the empire, stamped with the emperor's profile and worn smooth by countless transactions. But flip it over, and a careful twist of the edges would reveal its secret. A tiny compartment housing flint and steel, small enough to fit in a soldier's palm yet powerful enough to spark a blaze with a single strike. Rome's legions relied on controlled fire for everything from cooking meals to sending smoke signals across enemy lines. But carrying traditional fire-starting kits was a privilege reserved for officers. Anyone else caught with one risked harsh punishment. That's where the ingenuity of these coins came in. Smugglers and spies could carry dozens without suspicion, their true purpose disguised by the mundanity of loose change. Imagine a merchant paying for goods with a handful of coins, only for one to be discreetly palmed and struck against a buckle later, igniting a distraction fire that allowed stolen documents to vanish into the night. What made these devices so effective was their flawless camouflage. The hollowed-out interior didn't weaken the coin's structure, and the strike plate was cleverly disguised as part of the decorative border. Even the sound it made when dropped was indistinguishable from an ordinary denarius. Historians believe some may have been used in famous acts of sabotage, like the burning of enemy grain stores during wartime, blamed on accidents rather than covert operatives. Today, these coins are extraordinarily rare, often overlooked in museum collections or mislabeled as damaged currency. A few have been identified by the faint scrape marks near their edges, evidence of centuries-old sparks. But the true number in circulation remains a mystery. After all, the best hidden devices are the ones we're still failing to recognize even 2,000 years later. Among the most elegant smuggling devices ever created was the Persian water clock messenger, a masterpiece that turned time itself into a weapon of deception. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than an ornate timekeeping device, its carefully calibrated bowls and channels measuring hours through the steady trickle of water. But hidden within its beautifully crafted ceramic shell lay a network of secret compartments, each one perfectly sized to hold tightly rolled parchment scrolls. The genius wasn't just in the hiding place, it was in the way the clock's natural function masked its true purpose. Every movement of the device served as camouflage. As water dripped from one chamber to another, the gentle splashes covered the faint rustle of scrolls being inserted or removed. Even the slow, rhythmic pace of the clock worked in the spy's favor. Border guards inspecting cargo would see a functioning timepiece, not realizing its hollow base could hold battle plans, encrypted messages, or even maps of secret trade routes. The scrolls themselves were often written in disappearing ink or coded to resemble mundane merchant inventories, adding yet another layer of protection. What made these clocks so effective was their ubiquity. Water clocks were common in palaces, marketplaces, and caravans across the ancient world, making them the perfect vessels for covert communication. A spy could pass a timekeeper to a courier in broad daylight, with no one suspecting the exchange. Some historians believe these devices played a crucial role during wars between empires, allowing commanders to coordinate troop movements right under their enemies' noses. The craftsmanship involved was staggering. artisans designed the compartments to stay dry despite the surrounding water flow, and the scrolls were often wrapped in thin layers of waxed linen to prevent damage. Even the weight distribution was calculated. A loaded clock felt no heavier than an empty one, thanks to counterbalancing techniques borrowed from architecture. Today, only a handful of these dual-purpose clocks survive in museums, their hidden features sometimes overlooked until careful restoration reveals their secrets. They stand as a testament to an era when even the measurement of time could be a silent accomplice to intrigue. And they make us wonder how many other ordinary objects from the past might still be keeping their secrets in the glittering courts of ancient China, where every fold of silk and twist of jewelry spoke volumes about status and power. One accessory carried more than just beauty, it held lethal secrets. The hollow hairpin looked no different from the hundreds of other ornate pieces adorning noblewomen's hairstyles, delicate carvings of phoenixes or flowers, polished jade inlays, and slender shafts that shimmered in the palace lantern light. But hidden within these seemingly frivolous accessories lay compartments so precisely engineered they could store single drops of poison or razor-thin blades no wider than a strand of hair. What made these pins so effective was their perfect alignment with courtly customs. Noble women were rarely searched, their elaborate hairstyles considered private sanctuaries of personal adornment. A spy or assassin could slip a hollow pin into an updo during a crowded banquet, knowing the weapon would remain undetected even during the most formal inspections. Some pins held enough poison to tip a rival's teacup with a casual gesture. Others concealed retractable needles for delivering a fatal prick disguised as an affectionate touch. The most sophisticated designs even had locking mechanisms. Twist the phoenix's wing just so, and the hidden chamber would slide open without a sound. But these weren't just tools of murder, they were instruments of survival. During times of political upheaval, court ladies often used hollow pins to smuggle messages or escape tools to imprisoned family members. A single pin might contain a map scratched onto silk thread or a dose of medicine for ailing allies. The same artistry that made them deadly also made them indispensable lifelines. Modern archaeologists have identified only a handful of these pins in museum collections, often mistaking them for ordinary hair ornaments until X-rays reveal their hidden voids. One recovered from a Tang dynasty tomb still held traces of a plant-based toxin centuries later. Its potency lingered like a ghost. The craftsmanship was so refined that even today, we struggle to replicate the seamless joins that kept these secrets safe. These pins remind us that in the right hands, even the most delicate objects could become instruments of extraordinary power. They blurred the line between art and weapon, between fashion and function, proof that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones we brush past without a second glance. In the scorching sands of ancient Egypt, where a wrong turn could mean vanishing into the endless dunes, survival depended on one unassuming household item, the polished bronze mirror. To the untrained eye, it was just another domestic tool, used by women to arrange their wigs or check their coal-lined eyes. But in the hands of desert traders, these mirrors transformed into something extraordinary. Covert compasses capable of guiding caravans across hundreds of miles without attracting attention. The trick lay in the mirror's flawless reflective surface. By angling two mirrors precisely at the sun's reflection, navigators could create a makeshift sundial using the intersecting beams to determine true north. This technique was so accurate that some caravans relied on it more than traditional stars or landmarks, especially during sandstorms when the skies darkened. The real brilliance, though, was in the disguise. While royal expeditions carried conspicuous astrolabes and bulky navigation tools, ordinary traders could slip these mirrors into their packs without suspicion. Even if searched, they'd appear as nothing more than personal grooming items. What made these mirror compasses truly revolutionary was their role in secret expeditions. When pharaohs needed to send scouts to uncharted territories or relocate precious cargo without attracting tomb raiders, they equipped them with these unassuming tools. Some historians believe the mirrors played a crucial part in the famous expedition to the land of Punt, where traders brought back exotic spices and rare woods, all while hiding their navigation methods in plain sight. The craftsmanship behind these mirrors was no accident. Artisans deliberately made them slightly concave, enhancing their reflective properties for navigation while maintaining their everyday function. Some surviving examples show faint alignment marks etched discreetly along the edges, visible only when held at certain angles. Today, these mirrors sit quietly in museum cases, often labeled simply as cosmetic artifacts. But if you look closely at the wear patterns, the tiny scratches near the rims from repeated adjustments, the slightly uneven polish from years of sun alignment, you'll see the truth. These weren't just objects of vanity, they were the GPS of the ancient world, hidden in the hands of those who knew how to see. In the grand amphitheaters of ancient Greece, where actors' voices boomed across stone rows to thousands of spectators, no one thought to question the hollow eyes of their masks. These carved faces of tragedy and comedy weren't just props, they were masterpieces of covert engineering, designed to carry whispers like invisible threads through the roar of the crowd. While audiences wept at the fate of Oedipus or roared with laughter at Aristophanes' jokes, spies and rebels were using those very performances to exchange secrets right under the noses of soldiers and magistrates. The trick lay in the mask's acoustics. Crafted from thin, resonant wood and subtly curved inward, some masks contained hidden chambers that amplified and directed sound. An actor could murmur a message while pretending to adjust their headpiece, and the words would travel through the hollow interior, emerging near the ear of another performer standing yards away. To bystanders, it looked like nothing more than theatrical preparation, actors lost in their roles. But those in the know could relay troop movements, warn of impending arrests, or even coordinate escapes without ever breaking character. What made this system so brilliant was its flawless integration into public spectacle. Greek theater was sacred, a space where even enemies might gather peacefully for festivals. Guards rarely interrupted performances, and the masks themselves were considered ritual objects beyond suspicion. The best communicators could even synchronize their lines with the play's dialogue, weaving real messages into fictional speeches. Imagine a spy delivering a coded warning about a ship's arrival while reciting a monologue about Poseidon's wrath, the double meaning hidden in plain sight. Archaeologists have uncovered masks with unusual wear patterns, tiny holes near the mouth or ear, or interiors smoothed by repeated touches. Some even show traces of beeswax residue, likely used to fine-tune sound channels. But most evidence comes from fragmentary accounts, a line in a play hinting at voices that walk unseen, or a philosopher's complaint about actors who listen too closely to the wind. These masks remind us that the greatest secrets often hide where everyone is looking. In a society that worshipped storytelling, the stories themselves became the perfect disguise not just for heroes and gods, but for the quiet, desperate whispers of those fighting to survive. Battered by North Atlantic storms and shrouded in fog so thick it erased the horizon, Viking ships seemed to vanish into the void, yet somehow, they always found their way. The secret wasn't just in their sturdy longships or the stars above. It was hidden in the palms of their navigators, smooth, unassuming crystals of calcite, dismissed by outsiders as mere trinkets or trade curiosities. These were sunstones, nature's own GPS, and the Vikings guarded their true purpose with the same ferocity as their sword techniques. When clouds blotted out the sun for days, rendering traditional navigation impossible, these translucent stones became lifelines. Held to the sky, the calcite's unique property, polarizing light, revealed the sun's position like an invisible beacon. By rotating the crystal until its double image merged into one, a skilled navigator could pinpoint the sun's location with eerie accuracy, even at dawn or dusk when the light was faint. This wasn't just clever, it was revolutionary. While other cultures relied on clear skies or bulky instruments, Vikings could chart courses through the worst weather, their greatest tool disguised as a worthless rock. But why hide them? Because knowledge was power, and trade routes were empires. Norse laws strictly controlled navigation technology, forbidding its export to rival clans or foreign traders. So sunstones were smuggled aboard ships as decoration, tucked into cargo holds alongside amber and furs. Some were even drilled and worn as pendants, their true purpose masked by their beauty. Imagine a trader being inspected at a bustling port, guards rifling through his goods while the very tool guiding his voyages dangled openly from his neck, mistaken for jewelry. The genius of these stones lay in their dual nature. To the untrained eye, they were just pretty crystals, their optical magic invisible. But in the hands of a navigator, they became precision instruments, capable of calculating latitude by measuring the sun's arc across the sky. Historians believe this technology allowed Vikings to reach North America centuries before Columbus, their routes hidden not in maps but in the play of light through a stone's depths. Few original sunstones survive, most were lost to time or shattered in battles. But modern experiments prove their effectiveness. Researchers using replicas have navigated within 5 degrees of accuracy under total cloud cover, a margin so small it could mean the difference between landing on a fertile shore or vanishing into open ocean. These stones remind us that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs aren't flashy inventions but quiet understandings of light, of crystal, of the way nature itself can be coaxed into revealing its secrets. And for the Vikings, that knowledge wasn't just power, it was the thin line between home and oblivion. Beneath the sweltering sun of Mesoamerica, where jaguar pelts and jade ornaments marked elite status, one accessory carried more than decorative weight: the Mayan calendar belt buckle. To Spanish conquistadors and local overseers, these were just another example of native craftsmanship, their carved glyphs dismissed as primitive decoration. But pressed against the stomachs of resistance fighters, these buckles became silent orchestrators of rebellion, their intricate faces hiding miniature timekeeping systems precise enough to coordinate uprisings across vast territories. The brilliance lay in the calendar's dual purpose. On the surface, it displayed the conventional Tzolk'in calendar, its 20-day signs and 13 numbers aligning with sanctioned religious observances. But tilt the buckle 45 degrees under torchlight, and hidden grooves between the glyphs revealed a second, secret count, a system marking days for weapon smuggling, clandestine meetings, or attacks on colonial outposts. Some buckles even had movable parts. Rotating a central disc by one notch each sunset allowed wearers to track the countdown to revolt without ever speaking a word. Why risk carrying such dangerous knowledge? Because belts were intimate objects, rarely inspected. A nobleman's ornate buckle might pass through a dozen checkpoints unquestioned, while scrolls or wooden calendars would invite immediate suspicion. The Maya exploited this oversight masterfully. Women wove coded dates into the buckle's dangling straps, knots representing distances, bead colors hinting at rally points. Even the materials held meaning. Obsidian inlays signaled urgency, while turquoise meant patience. Archaeologists have uncovered buckles with peculiar wear patterns, edges smoothed by constant adjustments, or grooves darkened from repeated tracing. One found in a Guatemalan cave still had its movable disc frozen at a date matching historical records of a suppressed uprising. The craftsmanship was so precise that modern historians needed three-dimensional scanning to uncover layers of hidden notation beneath the surface carvings. These buckles did more than tell time. They weaponized it, turning the conqueror's own tools of oppression, the imposition of foreign calendars, into a resistance network. Every glance at the belt became an act of defiance, a reminder that while empires could burn cities, they couldn't silence the stars or stop the relentless march of days. And in that silent countdown, hope hid in plain sight. In the bustling markets and caravanserais of the Ottoman Empire, where the faithful paused to count their prayers on strings of beads, one humble object carried more than spiritual weight. These Tasbi prayer beads, smooth amber or olive wood slipping through fingers in rhythmic devotion, held secrets as tightly as they kept count. To inspectors and soldiers, they were just another symbol of piety, their hollow cores disguised by the mundane act of repetitive prayer. But twist a specific bead with practiced fingers, and the strand would reveal its true purpose. A covert recording device, its hollow chambers storing tightly rolled slips of parchment no wider than a grain of rice. The system was devastatingly simple. Each hollow bead could hold a single coded message, names of informants, troop movements, or smuggling routes written in ink that faded when exposed to air for too long. A courier praying in a mosque might discreetly transfer a bead to a contact during the communal bowing sequence, the exchange lost in the sea of identical motions. Even if searched, the bead's religious significance offered protection. Dismantling a Tasbi would be seen as sacrilege by most guards. Some strands even had decoy hollow beads filled with harmless spices, so if one compartment was discovered, the rest would escape notice. What made these beads so effective was their universality. From Istanbul to Damascus, prayer beads were as common as cloaks, carried by merchants, scholars, and nobles alike. A wealthy pasha's ornate amber strand might contain battle plans, while a dervish's worn wooden set could hold escape routes for political dissidents. The Ottomans' own bureaucratic efficiency worked against them. Their meticulous record-keeping meant religious items were rarely documented, let alone inspected. The craftsmanship behind these devices was extraordinary. Artisans drilled cores so precisely that scrolls could be inserted with a fine wire tool, yet the beads remained perfectly balanced when handled. Some had internal wax coatings to protect messages from humidity, while others used beads with subtly different weights to indicate which held intelligence. Modern conservators examining Ottoman-era Tasbi have found residues of organic inks and minute scratches around certain beads' drill holes, the only visible traces of their clandestine use. These strands did more than carry secrets. They turned an act of devotion into a shield, proving that sometimes the best hiding places aren't in shadows, but in the light of daily ritual. In a world where faith moved mountains, a simple string of beads could move empires. On the sun-baked trade routes of ancient India, where merchants moved like shadows between kingdoms, timekeeping wasn't just about schedules, it was about survival. Enter the ring sundial, a deceptively simple band of gold or bronze, its surface etched with delicate hour markers. To the untrained eye, it was just another piece of jewelry, indistinguishable from the rings worn by nobles and travelers alike. But tilt it just so in sunlight, and the shadow cast by its tiny central nodule would reveal the hour with startling precision. These rings weren't just elegant timekeepers, they were tools of subterfuge. In an era when sundials and water clocks were bulky and often controlled by local rulers, merchants needed a way to coordinate across cities without drawing attention. Imagine a spice trader in a crowded bazaar. casually adjusting his ring in the sunlight. To observers, he's merely admiring his jewelry, but the shadow falling across the inner markings tells him he has exactly 1 hour to meet a contact near the copper stalls before guards change shifts. The real genius lay in their adaptability. Unlike fixed sundials, these rings worked anywhere the sun shone. A merchant traveling from the monsoon-drenched coasts to the arid inland could rely on the same ring, its markings calibrated for the wearer's hand size to ensure accuracy. Some even had adjustable bands to account for seasonal changes in the sun's angle. And because they were worn, not carried, they bypassed inspections. No guard would confiscate a dignitary's signet ring, even if it secretly doubled as a clandestine clock. Archaeologists have uncovered rings with peculiar wear patterns, the inner grooves polished smooth from constant finger adjustments, or the nodules slightly flattened from years of catching sunlight. A few rare specimens bear tiny inscriptions, not names, but latitude coordinates, hinting at their use in cross-continental trade networks. What makes these artifacts so remarkable is their quiet defiance. In a world where time was power and power was hoarded by empires, these rings democratized it. They turned every sunbeam into a conspirator, proving that sometimes the most revolutionary tools aren't seized, they're worn. Woven from twisted gold and worn proudly around the necks of Celtic warriors and chieftains, torques were more than just symbols of status. They were masterclasses in covert communication. At first glance, these rigid neck rings appeared seamless, their gleaming surfaces unbroken by clasps or hinges, but hidden within their intricate braids lay a secret engineering marvel, threaded ends that could be unscrewed with a precise twist, revealing hollow chambers perfect for concealing tightly rolled birch bark scrolls. These weren't just decorative collars. In a world where tribal borders shifted with the seasons and rival clans controlled mountain passes, torques became lifelines. A chieftain gifting a torque to an ally might actually be delivering battle plans, the message protected from rain and prying eyes inside the golden tube. The design was ingenious. Tightly wound metal threads acted as natural locks, requiring a specific combination of rotations to open. Some even had false seams to mislead anyone attempting to force them apart. What made torques the perfect smuggling devices was their cultural significance. Breaking or tampering with one was considered sacrilege, deterring even the most suspicious border guards. Warriors wore them into battles and negotiations alike, their weight a constant reminder of loyalty and the perfect cover for espionage. Imagine a messenger captured by rival tribes, his torque examined hastily and dismissed as mere ornamentation while the real intelligence sat untouched inside. The craftsmanship behind these hollow torques was staggering. Artisans designed them to balance weight and strength, ensuring the hollowed segments wouldn't weaken the structure. Some surviving examples show microscopic wear patterns near the threads, evidence of frequent opening and closing. Archaeologists have even found traces of organic residue inside, suggesting some scrolls were coated in beeswax for waterproofing. But perhaps the most brilliant feature was their adaptability. Unlike fragile containers, torques could withstand rough journeys, jostling in saddlebags, surviving river crossings, even enduring combat. A single torque might carry maps of hidden trails 1 month, then smuggling routes for iron ore the next. Their very ubiquity made them invisible. In a sea of identical-looking neck rings, only those who knew the twist could access the secrets within. These golden messengers remind us that sometimes the best hiding places aren't concealed, they're celebrated. In plain sight, around the necks of those who moved through the ancient world with quiet purpose, torques turned prestige into protection, proving that the most powerful secrets often wear the face of tradition. In the bustling marketplaces of Tenochtitlan, where jade and cocoa beans changed hands under the watchful eyes of Aztec warriors, one everyday object hid a lethal secret: the humble wooden comb. To outsiders, these combs were simple grooming tools, their teeth evenly spaced for detangling hair or applying fragrant oils. But hidden beneath their smooth surfaces lay thin, razor-sharp blades of obsidian, carefully embedded along the spine. With a quick twist, what appeared to be a harmless personal item could transform into a weapon capable of slashing through leather armor or severing ropes in a single motion. The genius of these blade combs lay in their perfect disguise. Aztec society placed high value on personal grooming combs were carried by nearly everyone, from nobles to merchants. Guards inspecting goods at city gates would see nothing unusual in a traveler's belongings, even as the comb's volcanic glass edges waited silently for the right moment. Some designs featured detachable handles that unscrewed to reveal needle-thin stilettos, while others had blades concealed behind decorative inlays of turquoise or shell. The obsidian itself was a masterstroke sharper than steel, yet brittle enough to shatter if examined too roughly, leaving no evidence if discovered. Why such elaborate deception? Because weapons were strictly controlled in Aztec cities, particularly during tense political periods. Warriors carried macuahuitl clubs openly, but rebels, spies, or escaping slaves needed tools that wouldn't attract attention. A comb tucked into a hair bundle or hanging from a belt aroused zero suspicion until it was too late. Historical accounts describe surprise attacks where assassins disguised as traders or servants drew these hidden blades during crowded festivals, vanishing into the chaos before guards could react. The craftsmanship behind these dual-purpose combs was astonishing. Artisans carved the wooden frames to exact thicknesses, thin enough to hide the blades, yet sturdy enough to withstand daily use without revealing their secret. Some recovered specimens show where patterns suggesting they were used for years as ordinary combs before being deployed as weapons. The obsidian edges were often serrated for maximum effect, yet polished smooth along the outer edges to avoid accidental cuts during grooming. Perhaps most chilling is how these combs blurred the line between beauty and brutality. In a culture where appearance reflected social standing, something as mundane as adjusting one's hair could mask the motion of arming oneself. Even today, archaeologists sometimes misclassify these artifacts until microscopic analysis reveals telltale blood residue or the faintest shadow of a blade's impression in the wood. They serve as a reminder that in the right hands, even the most ordinary objects can become instruments of extraordinary cunning, where a single stroke could mean the difference between survival and sacrifice. Beneath the flickering glow of a monastery's candlelight, what seemed like simple beeswax could mean the difference between knowledge lost forever and a civilization's survival. Byzantine scholars facing invasion perfected one of history's most ingenious smuggling devices: candles that doubled as covert maps. To the untrained eye, these were indistinguishable from ordinary devotional candles, their smooth surfaces etched with faint decorative grooves. But when melted carefully over a flame, the wax would soften just enough to peel apart in layers, revealing intricate maps drawn on thin sheets of linen or parchment, pressed between the wax like secrets waiting to be awakened. The technique was born of desperation. As libraries burned and cities fell, scholars needed a way to preserve precious geographic knowledge, trade routes to safe havens, hidden mountain passes, even the locations of underground cisterns without alerting raiders. Candles were the perfect disguise. No invading soldier would suspect a humble light source, especially one used in religious rituals. Some maps were drawn with heat-sensitive inks that only became visible when warmed, while others used layered wax to create raised topography, allowing refugees to trace escape routes by touch in total darkness. What made these candle maps so effective was their flawless integration into daily life. monks could carry dozens lit around their sanctuaries during raids, the very objects meant to illuminate sacred spaces now safeguarding the path to survival. The wax itself acted as a preservative, protecting the delicate maps from moisture and decay. Some candles were even designed to burn unevenly, ensuring the map would emerge at a specific hour, giving fleeing scholars a head start before pursuers realized what had happened. The craftsmanship behind these devices was extraordinary. Artisans mixed the wax with precise ratios of resin to control its melting point, ensuring the map would emerge intact at the right moment. The linen sheets were treated with alum to resist flame, while the maps were often drawn in miniature, requiring magnifying lenses hidden in prayer beads to decipher. Archaeologists have found candle remnants with unusual residue patterns, traces of plant-based adhesives or pigments that suggest some maps could be reused, the wax reheated and reshaped around new intelligence. Perhaps most haunting is how these candles symbolize the fragility of knowledge itself. In their unlit state, they held only potential silent, unreadable, their power dormant. But with careful patience, the very act of burning revealed salvation. They remind us that sometimes light doesn't just illuminate, it transforms, turning ordinary objects into lifelines and proving that even in the darkest times, ingenuity can hide in something as simple as a flame's gentle glow. In the refined courts of feudal Japan, where every gesture held meaning and a misplaced word could spell disaster, the folding fan was more than just an accessory. It was a silent sentinel of secrets. These elegant tesson or iron fans appeared identical to the delicate paper and bamboo versions used in tea ceremonies or summer dances, but hidden within their slender ribs lay blades so sharp they could slice through silk or flesh with a flick of the wrist. What made these fan daggers so devastating was their flawless deception. Samurai guards scrutinized swords at palace gates, but no one thought to confiscate a geisha's folding fan, especially when its painted scenes of cherry blossoms or cranes matched current artistic trends. Some designs even mimicked specific court fashions. A fan decorated with a warlord's crest might be waved openly under his nose, its deadly core undetected until it was too late. The blades themselves were marvels of metallurgy, thin as needles yet strong enough to pierce light armor when thrust between ribs. The true genius lay in their dual functionality. A practiced hand could use the fan, normally cooling the face during performances, then snap it shut in an instant, transforming it into a stabbing weapon or blunt force tool. Historical accounts describe assassinations where killers escaped by reopening the fan mid-flee, blending back into crowds of startled courtiers. Others tell of geishas using them to defend against unwelcome advances, their frivolous accessories suddenly becoming lifelines. Crafting these weapons required extraordinary skill. Artisans balanced the weight so the fan wouldn't feel unnaturally heavy, while ensuring the blade mechanism never rattled or jammed. Some surviving examples show hidden locking mechanisms. Twist a particular rivet, and the blade would extend silently. Others had hollow ribs that could store poisons or tiny scrolls, turning the fan into a complete espionage kit. Today, these artifacts are rare. Many were destroyed after the Edo period as Japan modernized, but a few preserved in museum collections reveal their secrets under X-rays, the ghostly outlines of blades long removed or faint blood traces in the hinge crevices. They stand as reminders that in a world where beauty and danger walked hand in hand, sometimes the most lethal threats came not from drawn swords, but from the graceful arc of a fan's unfolding. High in the Andes, where the thin air made record-keeping a challenge and written language non-existent, the Inca Empire built an administrative marvel, not on parchment or stone, but on strings. The quipu looked deceptively simple, a primary cord dangling colorful knotted strands like the tassels on a nobleman's cloak. But to those who understood their language, these weren't decorations. They were spreadsheets, calendars, and military logs woven into a portable, tamper-proof system that could track everything from grain harvests to troop movements across thousands of miles. The real magic lay in the knots. By varying their spacing, tightness, and position along the strings, Quipus record keepers could encode staggering amounts of data. A single cluster might represent a village tax obligations, with different colors denoting corn, wool, or labor hours. The knot's positions corresponded to numerical values in a base 10 system, loose loops for single digits, complex reef knots for hundreds. Some Quipus even used pendant cords branching off main strands, creating a three-dimensional data structure that modern researchers compare to nested spreadsheets. What made Quipus so revolutionary was their dual nature. To Spanish conquistadors, they were primitive trinkets, unworthy of scrutiny compared to golden idols. But in reality, they were the empire's central nervous system. Messengers running the Inca road network carried Quipus like encrypted USB drives, their knots relaying census updates or supply requests between cities. The system was so secure that even if a Quipus was intercepted, only trained specialists could decode it, a built-in security feature that protected sensitive information. The colors held meaning too. Crimson strands might signal urgent military dispatches, while earthy browns tracked agricultural yields. Recent studies suggest some Quipus used dye patterns to represent non-numerical information, possibly even narratives, turning them into a form of tactile storytelling. One surviving Quipus from Peru's coastal deserts shows salt crystallization in its fibers, hinting at its use in tracking maritime trade routes where humidity would have destroyed paper records. Yet the greatest testament to their ingenuity was their invisibility. Quipus blended seamlessly into Andean life, hanging harmlessly from administrative buildings or tucked into officials' belts. When the Spanish demanded tribute records, Inca scribes could present flawless accounts while secretly preserving forbidden knowledge in knots only their people could read. Today, fewer than 1,000 Quipus survive, their full complexity still not fully deciphered. They whisper of a civilization that turned string into software, proving that sometimes the most advanced technology doesn't look like technology at all, just colorful threads waiting for the right hands to tease out their secrets. In the dim candlelight of medieval monasteries where holy books were chained to desks to prevent theft, one sacred text might have held more than psalms. It held the key to freedom. These weren't just devotional volumes, they were masterfully altered Bibles, their thick vellum pages painstakingly hollowed out to conceal slender lockpicks, tension wrenches, and even saw blades thin enough to slice through iron shackles. To the untrained eye, they appeared as pious as any other scripture until a desperate hand slid between the pages and found salvation disguised as scripture. The deception was breathtaking in its simplicity. Medieval authorities rarely inspected religious texts too closely, especially those carried by clerics or scholars. A Bible's weighty binding provided perfect cover for the slight bulge of hidden tools, while its gold leaf edges masked telltale cuts along the page margins. Some were even crafted with a decoy, passages' outer leaves left intact to flip through convincingly, while inner pages formed a secret compartment. The most sophisticated designs used layered parchment to muffle the metallic clink of tools during inspections. Lockpicks themselves were works of art. Forged from hardened bronze or antler bone, they mimicked the shape of writing quills when nestled among pages. Others were disguised as decorative bookmarks, their delicate tips sharpened into lock-probing hooks. Historical records tell of prisoners in tower dungeons receiving spiritual comfort from visiting monks only to later find their cell doors mysteriously ajar, the Bible left behind as innocently as it had arrived. But these weren't just tools of escape. During periods of religious persecution, hollowed Bibles smuggled more than lockpicks. They carried forbidden translations, heretical texts, or maps to safe houses. A bishop's Bible might conceal a knife for self-defense during perilous journeys between abbeys, while a merchant psalter could hide lock-breaking tools for sabotaging rival trade caravans' chests. The very act of carrying scripture became the perfect alibi. The craftsmanship involved was extraordinary. Bookbinders used glues that dried flexible, allowing compartments to reopen silently after years of use. Some surviving examples show pages dyed to match age stains, making cuts nearly invisible. Others had weighted spines to compensate for removed parchment, ensuring the book felt authentic when handled. What makes these artifacts so chilling is how they weaponized faith itself. In an era where the Church's word was law, the holiest of objects became unlikely allies to rebels and reformers. They remind us that when survival hangs in the balance, even the most sacred pages might whisper secret, if you know where to look. Amid the swirling incense and opulent courts of the medieval Islamic world, where a nobleman's status was measured by the rarity of his fragrances, one gift could be as deadly as it was delightful: the perfume balm. These delicate glass vials, hand-blown into elegant curves and filled with the most coveted scents of rose, amber, or oud, were the perfect Trojan horses. To the recipient, they promised luxury. To the assassin who crafted them, they were precision instruments of chaos, designed to detonate the moment the stopper was twisted free. The mechanism was diabolically simple. Artisans would lay a volatile naphtha, a precursor to modern gasoline, beneath the perfume, separated by a thin barrier of wax or resin. As the bottle's neck warmed in the user's hands, the seal would weaken just enough to ignite when exposed to air. The resulting explosion wasn't just loud, it was catastrophic, spraying flaming liquid across silk robes and polished marble floors. Historical accounts describe banquet halls thrown into panic as what began as a ceremonial fragrance exchange turned into a firestorm. The attacker long vanished into the crowd. What made these devices so terrifying was their flawless disguise. Perfume bottles were customary gifts among the elite, exchanged during weddings, treaties, or diplomatic visits. No guard would think to inspect a vizier's present to a rival emir, especially when the glasswork bore the intricate floral patterns favored by royal workshops. Some assassins took extra care to match regional styles. A bottle from Damascus might feature cobalt vines, while one destined for Cairo shimmered with gold flecks. The explosives themselves were masterworks of chemistry, calibrated to combust only after enough time had passed to eliminate suspicion. The psychological impact was as calculated as the engineering. Survivors spoke of the lingering scent of jasmine clinging to scorched tapestries, a cruel juxtaposition of beauty and violence. These attacks didn't just kill, they weaponized trust, turning a universal gesture of goodwill into a harbinger of doom. Few examples survive intact, most shattered in their intended use, but archaeologists have found glass fragments with peculiar residue patterns in palace ruins across the Middle East. Some shards still bear traces of perfumed oils mixed with oxidizer compounds, silent witnesses to a time when the sweetest gifts carried the bitterest betrayals. They remind us that in the shadows of history, even the most delicate objects could become instruments of vengeance, their lethal potential hidden behind a veil of artistry and tradition. The clatter of dice in a smoky Norse longhouse might have sounded like simple entertainment, but for those who knew how to listen, each roll carried hidden meaning. These weren't ordinary gaming pieces, they were runed dice, their 6 faces carved not with pips but with ancient symbols that could weave secret messages between the laughter of drunkards and the clink of wagered silver. To outsiders, it was just another rowdy night of gambling. To spies and rebels, it was an unbreakable code hiding in plain sight. The system was brilliantly straightforward. Each rune represented both a letter and a concept. A single symbol could mean wealth in one context or the sound F in another. Players would agree on a cipher beforehand, perhaps rolling 3 dice in sequence, then using only the second rune's numerical value from the Elder Fathark alphabet. A seemingly random throw of answers, communication, raid hode journey, and Berkonnen rebirth might translate to coordinates for a hidden meeting spot. The real magic lay in the noise. Dozens of dice games happening simultaneously created perfect cover for covert exchanges. A warrior might roll a losing combination to signal an ambush was delayed, or accidentally knock over his cup to scramble the dice when guards entered. What made these dice so effective was their cultural camouflage. Norse society celebrated gambling as a test of fate. Even kings were known to wager entire ships in games of chance. No one questioned dice on a tavern table, especially when carved from common materials like bone or antler. But beneath their worn surfaces, some held subtle modifications, weighted edges to favor certain runes, or tiny scratches marking them as belonging to specific networks. Archaeologists have found dice with peculiar wear patterns, certain runes polished smooth from frequent selection, while others remained sharp-edged from neglect. The gambling dens themselves became nerve centers of espionage. A drunkard's exaggerated celebration over a lucky roll might mask him passing a die to a contact. Some tavern keepers were in on the game, using marked cups to randomly select which patrons played together. There are accounts of entire rebellions coordinated this way, with warriors dispersing coded battle plans through dice games in a dozen different villages. Even the bets were part of the deception. Wagering a silver arm ring could signify the number of ships approaching, while losing on purpose might confirm a message had been received. But perhaps the most astonishing feature was the dice's dual nature. Unlike fragile scrolls or conspicuous carvings, these gaming pieces were meant to be handled. Their very wear and tear adding to their authenticity. A die confiscated by a suspicious jarl would reveal nothing under interrogation. Without the cipher key, it was just a toy. Some sets even included decoy rune symbols that meant nothing, ensuring only initiates could separate signal from noise. Today, these dice sit in museum cases, their once vital secrets now silent. But if you look closely at the nicks and stains covering their surfaces, you'll see more than gaming relics. You'll see the scars of a communication network that thrived in the open, turning chance into strategy and laughter into a language all its own. In a world where speaking aloud could mean death, sometimes the safest way to send a message was to let the dice do the talking. Across the misty mountain passes of the Ming dynasty, where imperial inspectors scrutinized every caravan for contraband, the most dangerous secrets weren't hidden in false-bottomed chests or sewn into linings. They were stacked openly in the cargo, labeled as one of China's most ordinary exports, tea. These unassuming bricks of compressed leaves, stamped with merchant seals and bundled in hemp, held messages that only hot water could reveal. To customs officials, they were just another taxable commodity. But when steeped in a contact's teapot, the liquid would darken not with the usual amber hue, but with lines of precise characters swimming to the surface, a spy's report etched in invisible ink made from fermented rice paste and crushed gallnuts. The technique was devastatingly simple. Before compression, artisans would brush the secret messages onto layers of tea leaves using the colorless mixture. then press them into bricks with enough force to conceal the writing beneath the surface. The ink itself was chemically inert until heated, making it undetectable to even the most thorough inspections. Some bricks contained maps of restricted border crossings, while others listed corrupt officials willing to accept bribes, intelligence that could make or break a trading empire. The real stroke of genius was in the delivery. Merchants could hand over entire shipments as gifts to officials, knowing the recipient would brew the incriminating evidence himself during routine tea ceremonies. What made this system so effective was its flawless alignment with Ming bureaucracy. Tea was one of the dynasty's most tightly regulated goods, with strict records of weights and destinations, but no inspector would destroy valuable cargo by steeping random bricks to check for messages. The ink compounds were also region-specific. Formulas from Fujian province used local seaweed extracts that developed at lower temperatures, perfect for delicate green teas, while northern recipes required the near-boiling water used for fermented pearl. Merchants even exploited seasonal variations. Winter shipments might use slower dissolving inks to account for colder brewing conditions. The social customs surrounding tea provided additional cover. It was considered deeply disrespectful to decline or mishandle gifted tea, ensuring bricks would reach their intended recipients intact. Some spies took this further, embedding multiple messages in a single brick. Surface inscriptions visible when briefly steeped might contain decoy information, while a second, longer infusion revealed the true intelligence. Archaeologists examining Ming-era tea bricks have found faint grooves where messages were brushed, and modern recreations prove the inks remain readable after 600 years in storage. Perhaps the most brilliant aspect was the system's deniability. If confronted, a merchant could truthfully claim ignorance. After all, the message only appeared when someone else prepared the tea. In a world where paper scrolls could be confiscated and oral messages coerced, these steeping secrets turned an everyday ritual into the ultimate dead drop. They remind us that sometimes the best hiding places aren't in shadows or locked chests, but in the steam rising from an innocent cup waiting for the right moment to spill its truth. In the bustling ports of ancient Carthage, where merchants haggled over spices and silver, the most lethal weapon wasn't a dagger or a sword, it was the loose change jingling in their pockets. These tiny bronze coins, stamped with the familiar profile of a Carthaginian noble or the goddess Tanit, looked utterly ordinary at first glance, but flick the edge just right, and a slender blade would spring forth, sharp enough to slit a throat before the victim could cry out. The design was chilling in its simplicity. Each coin knife was engineered with a hidden pivot mechanism, allowing the blade to retract flush with the coin's surface when not in use. To customs officials or rival traders, it was just another piece of currency, slightly thicker than most, perhaps, but nothing worth a second glance. The real genius lay in the way they exploited everyday behaviors. A merchant paying for goods might casually palm one of these coins, only to deploy it moments later in a crowded alley. The blade's short length wasn't a weakness, it was calculated for close-quarter strikes, leaving wounds that could be mistaken for accidental cuts in the chaos of a marketplace brawl. What made these devices so terrifying was their sheer ubiquity. Coins passed through countless hands daily, making them the perfect vectors for covert violence. Assassins could plant them on unsuspecting couriers, ensuring the weapon would travel far beyond their own movements. Some historical accounts suggest they were used in the infamous mercenary uprisings against Carthage, where a disgruntled soldier might drop a coin near a commander's tent, only for an ally to retrieve it later with deadly intent. The craftsmanship behind these coin knives was extraordinary. Artisans balanced the weight so the blade wouldn't rattle, and the metal alloys were carefully chosen to resist corrosion, a critical feature in salty Mediterranean ports. Modern examinations of surviving specimens reveal microscopic wear patterns around the pivot points, evidence of repeated deployments. Some even show traces of organic residue, hinting at their grim purpose. Yet the most unsettling aspect was their psychological impact. In a society built on trade where trust was currency, these weapons turned every handshake, every payment into a potential threat. They eroded the very foundations of commerce, making allies wonder if the coins warming in their palms might one day turn cold with lethal intent. Today, these artifacts sit quietly in museum cases, their blades forever retracted. But their legacy lingers, a reminder that sometimes the deadliest secrets are the ones we exchange without thinking. Buried beneath the sands of ancient Mesopotamia, where merchants and scribes traded goods and knowledge, some clay tablets held more than cuneiform receipts. They were the world's first known combination locks. At first glance, these Sumerian tablets appeared ordinary, their surfaces etched with inventories of grain or livestock. But hidden within their thick, sun-baked bodies lay hollow chambers, accessible only to those who knew the precise sequence of pressure points to press along the edges. A trader might hand over such a tablet as proof of debt, never suspecting it secretly held a bronze key to a warehouse, or even a tightly rolled papyrus map of secret trade routes. The genius of these tablet locks lay in their flawless mimicry of bureaucracy. In a society where clay records were as common as dust, no official would think to break one open without cause, especially when the exterior markings matched legitimate transactions. To open one, you'd need to apply pressure to specific wedges of the cuneiform script in a particular order, causing internal pins to align and release the hidden compartment. Some designs even used the tablet's own accounting figures as the code. Pressing the numerals for 30 jars of oil and 7 sheep in sequence might unlock the chamber. What made these devices so revolutionary was their dual purpose. A tablet could simultaneously serve as a receipt for tax collectors and a covert container for sensitive documents. Merchants crossing borders carried them openly, knowing that even if inspected, the clay's solid appearance would deter closer examination. Some surviving examples show faint wear patterns around certain glyphs, evidence of repeated openings, while others bear tiny air holes disguised as cuneiform dots, preventing moisture from damaging the hidden contents. Archaeologists have uncovered tablets with unusual weight distributions or hollow echoes when tapped, but many were likely destroyed over millennia as worthless broken clay. A rare few, preserved in temple archives, reveal their secrets under X-rays. One housed a silver key shaped like a barley stalk. Another held a scrap of linen listing names of rebel sympathizers. The craftsmanship was astonishing. Potters mixed chaff into the clay to strengthen the hidden chambers, and the locking mechanisms were precise enough to withstand jostling in saddlebags yet yield to the right touch. These tablets blur the line between record-keeping and espionage. In a world where writing itself was a closely guarded skill, they turned literacy into a tool of subterfuge, proving that sometimes the most powerful secrets aren't whispered. They're baked into the very documents we'd least suspect. Deep in the jungles of Ankara, where towering stone temples rose like mountains from the green, an early warning system hid in plain sight, not in watchtowers or signal fires, but in the gentle chime of elephant bells. These ornate bronze bells, strapped to temple elephants during ceremonies, appeared to serve a purely decorative purpose, their deep tones marking the stately procession of sacred animals. But twist the internal clapper just so, and the same bell could produce sharp, staccato bursts of sound, a coded alarm system audible for miles across the dense canopy. The system was devastatingly simple yet impossible to intercept. Each bell contained a weighted clapper with multiple striking surfaces. By adjusting the angle of the clapper with a hidden lever near the strap, handlers could switch between the deep, resonant tones of peaceful processions and rapid, irregular patterns signaling danger. Some codes indicated the direction of approaching threats: 3 quick strikes, a pause, then 2 more might mean enemies advancing from the west. Others warned of specific dangers: the steady clang, clang, clang of bandits versus the erratic clang, clang, clang of invading armies. To outsiders, it was just the natural cacophony of temple life. To those trained to listen, every dissonant note carried life or death meaning. What made these bells so brilliant was their cultural camouflage. Elephants were sacred in Khmer society, their movements never questioned. A guard searching for smuggled messages would never suspect the great bronze bell swaying harmlessly on a temple elephant's harness, even as its altered chimes sent rebels scrambling to hidden jungle paths. Some bells even had false bottoms containing scrolls with evacuation plans, accessible only when the clapper was removed during routine maintenance. The craftsmanship behind these dual-purpose alarms was extraordinary. Artisans cast the bronze with precise thicknesses to control resonance, thinner walls for warning clangs that carried farther, denser metal for ceremonial tones that faded gracefully. Some surviving examples show where patterns on internal levers, evidence of frequent adjustments. Others bear tiny air channels that altered the sound when the clapper struck at certain angles, creating distinct auditory signatures. Perhaps most ingenious was how the system exploited the elephants themselves. The animals' predictable daily routes, from watering holes to temple plazas, turned them into mobile alarm towers. A handler could subtly adjust the bells during their rounds, ensuring the warning spread organically through populated areas without arousing suspicion. Historical accounts describe invaders bewildered by entire villages evaporating into the jungle moments before attack, alerted by nothing more than a distant, dissonant chime. These bells didn't just sound alarms, they shaped history. When the Siamese army laid siege to Angkor in the 15th century, it was the altered peals of elephant bells that gave monks enough time to smuggle sacred texts out of burning libraries. Today, a few surviving specimens sit in museums, their silent clappers frozen mid-swing. But if you listen closely to the old stories whispered in Cambodian villages, you might still hear echoes of their secret language, a reminder that sometimes the loudest warnings come disguised as music. In the mist-shrouded forests of Aotearoa, where towering kori trees whispered ancient secrets, the Maori carved walking stick was far more than a simple aid for elders. It was a masterpiece of concealed defense. These ornate te ahawenua, as they were known, appeared at first glance to be nothing more than beautifully crafted walking aids, their polished wood adorned with intricate spiral patterns and ancestral figures. But with a swift twist of the handle, the bottom third would detach to reveal a razor-sharp blade forged from hardened greenstone or whalebone, transforming an object of daily life into a weapon worthy of a warrior. The deception lay in the cultural expectations surrounding these objects. In Maori society, elaborately carved walking sticks were common among tribal leaders and respected elders, symbols of status rather than suspicion. The same swirling koru patterns that told stories of creation and lineage also served to distract from the subtle seam where the blade section separated. Some designs even incorporated natural features. A flaw in the wood grain might cleverly conceal the release mechanism, while decorative lashing cords doubled as locking straps to prevent accidental deployment. What made these weapons so effective was their perfect adaptation to their environment. The dense forests and steep hills of New Zealand made walking sticks practical for everyone, ensuring they attracted no unusual attention. During periods of intertribal conflict or European colonization, warriors could move freely through checkpoint areas armed with what appeared to be harmless cultural artifacts. Historical accounts describe surprised British soldiers discovering too late that the old man's stick, leaning against a meeting house wall, was actually a deadly blade, its owner having quietly armed himself during tense negotiations. The craftsmanship behind these dual-purpose weapons was extraordinary. Artisans selected woods like puriri or mare for their density and flexibility, carving them so the hollowed section containing the blade wouldn't weaken the overall structure. The blades themselves were works of art. Some greenstone examples took months to grind to perfection, their polished surfaces gleaming like water when finally revealed. Many incorporated traditional weapon features into their hidden elements. A whalebone blade might be notched like a shark's tooth, while others had grooves designed to amplify the distinctive hissing sound of a swift draw. Perhaps most ingenious was how these walking sticks blurred the line between art and armament. The same swirling patterns that depicted Tain separating earth and sky could guide a warrior's grip during combat. A knob carved as a tiki face might unscrew to reveal a compartment for storing poison tips. Even the rhythmic tapping sound as the stick struck the ground served a purpose. Varying the cadence could signal warnings to nearby allies, turning an ordinary walk into a covert communication system. Today, surviving examples in museum collections often go unidentified as weapons, their blades remaining discreetly sheathed. But if you examine them closely, you'll notice the subtle signs, the slightly darker patina on the detachable section from generations of oily hands gripping it just so, or the faintest metallic scent lingering in the hollow despite centuries of storage. They stand as testament to an era when survival demanded creativity, when even the most beautiful objects might reveal hidden edges to those who knew where to look, and when walking softly through the world didn't mean going unarmed. High above the nave of medieval cathedrals, where saints and gargoyles gazed sternly over the faithful, stonemasons left more than just religious iconography. They embedded entire blueprints in plain sight. These elaborate carvings weren't merely decorative, they were covert engineering manuals, their swirling vines, geometric patterns, and even the folds of sculpted robes concealing precise measurements and structural diagrams. To the untrained eye, they were divine artistry, but to the initiated, they were a rebellion etched in stone, a way to bypass the church's tight control over architectural knowledge. The system relied on sacred geometry disguised as ornamentation. A rose window's petals might encode the ideal angle for flying buttresses, while the spacing between carved leaves could correspond to the width of load-bearing walls. Some masons even hid compass markings in the drapery of statues' subtle curves, indicating the radius of arches or the slope of vaulted ceilings. The genius was in the dual meaning. What appeared as a biblical scene to clergy and parishioners doubled as a construction guide for guild members moving between cities. A mason arriving in Chartres could read the facade like a textbook, reconstructing complex techniques without carrying incriminating parchment. Why such elaborate secrecy? Because cathedral designs were fiercely guarded intellectual property. The church demanded uniformity in sacred spaces, but regional guilds developed their own innovations, reinforced piers, hidden drainage systems that they refused to share openly. By embedding these breakthroughs in carvings, knowledge could spread without alerting authorities. A grinning, grotesque twisted tail might reveal a revolutionary mortar formula, while the precise number of feathers on an angel's wing could denote the ratio of sand to lime in the strongest plaster. The risks were immense. During the Albigensian Crusade, masons suspected of heresy were scrutinized for unauthorized designs. Some responded by doubling down on symbolism. A popular workaround was disguising measurements as musical notation, since hymns were considered beyond reproach. The facade of Rheims Cathedral, for instance, contains choir stalls with bench supports carved at intervals, matching the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical marvel passed off as harmonic design. Modern laser scans have uncovered layers of intentionality in these carvings. At Strasbourg Cathedral, the folds of a saint's robe align perfectly with stress diagrams for the tower's foundation, while Lincoln Cathedral's famous Judgment Porch hides load distribution formulas in the scales of Christ's cloak. The most sophisticated examples use shadow play carvings positioned so daylight reveals critical lines only at certain times, like the summer solstice, when guild masters would gather to decode them. These stonemasons didn't just build cathedrals, they weaponized beauty, turning every angel and apostle into a silent teacher. Their legacy whispers from the stones that knowledge once set free in art can never truly be controlled. Even now, as tourists gaze up at these marvels, they're standing amid the greatest act of clandestine education in history, a testament to human ingenuity chiseled right under the nose of power. Among the swaying camel caravans crossing the Gobi Desert, where shifting dunes erased trails like waves smoothing sand, survival depended on more than the stars. It relied on the subtle alchemy of spice jars. These unassuming clay pots tucked between bolts of silk and sacks of tea didn't just flavor meals, they held the key to navigation. When blended in precise ratios, spices like powdered saffron, crushed galangal, and fermented turmeric would undergo a slow, silent transformation. Exposed to the desert's dry air, the mixture would gradually darken along one edge, drawn by the same magnetic forces that guided compass needles. Only this reaction worked underground, undetectable to bandits or rival traders. The process was deceptively simple. Before a journey, navigators would fill shallow lacquer trays with these reactive blends, sealing them with perforated lids to control airflow. As the caravan moved, the spices would oxidize unevenly, their color shifts pointing toward the Earth's magnetic poles like an aromatic lodestone. A deep russet streak forming along the tray's northern edge might signal a needed course correction, while an even browning indicated true eastward progress. The real stroke of genius, these blends were calibrated to regional conditions. Recipes from Samarkand included iron-rich cumin to enhance sensitivity, while Tibetan variants used saltpeter to counteract high-altitude humidity. What made these spice compasses so revolutionary was their invisibility. Unlike traditional navigational tools which could be confiscated or stolen, these were just another culinary supply. Even if inspected, the trays resembled nothing more than portable spice racks for seasoning meals around campfires. Some caravans took the ruse further, deliberately preparing pungent dishes with decoy spices to mask the true purpose of their carefully measured navigational blends. Historical accounts describe Mongol scouts tasting the wind by sniffing their spice trays, a theatrical gesture that disguised them checking for the telltale metallic tang of active oxidation. The craftsmanship behind these blends was extraordinary. Master navigators guarded their recipes as tightly as gold, passing them down through generations in coded song lyrics or woven into carpet patterns. Certain mixtures required spices harvested at specific lunar phases, while others incorporated minute shavings of meteoritic iron for enhanced magnetic properties. Modern experiments recreating these blends using 14th century Persian manuals found some could maintain accuracy within 5 degrees, even buried in saddlebags or exposed to temperature swings. Perhaps the most ingenious aspect was how these compasses exploited the Silk Road's own infrastructure. Major trading posts became repositories of navigational knowledge, with spice sellers subtly adjusting their wares' compositions to reflect local magnetic variations. A merchant purchasing cooking spices in Kashgar might unknowingly acquire a blend tuned to the Taklamakan's unique mineral deposits. This decentralized system meant no single caravan could be forced to reveal routes. The path forward literally dissolved into their evening stew once its purpose was served. Today, faint traces of these practices linger. In remote Himalayan villages, elders still prepare ceremonial spice mixes with unexplained precision, their measurements aligning suspiciously with ancient trade routes. And if you examine certain heirloom spice jars from Istanbul to Zion, you might notice peculiar residue patterns, uneven staining along one interior curve, as if waiting, even now, to point the way home. Across the vast Pacific, where waves stretch farther than the eye can see and stars shift with the seasons, Polynesian navigators carried maps not on parchment or wood, but on their very skin. These intricate tribal tattoos weren't just marks of identity or rites of passage. They were living, breathing charts etched in ink and memory, their swirling patterns encoding the secrets of the ocean itself. To untrained eyes, they appeared as beautiful abstractions, curved lines mimicking waves, symmetrical dots like scattered islands. But to those initiated in the sacred art of wayfinding, these designs held precise celestial alignments, current patterns, and even the distinctive shapes of distant atolls barely visible on the horizon. The system was as elegant as it was impenetrable. Master navigators would receive tattoos in stages, each new layer of ink representing hard-won knowledge. A series of arched lines along the shoulder might map the trade winds between Tahiti and Hawaii, their spacing indicating the strength and duration of seasonal gusts. Dots clustered near the elbow could pinpoint chains of uninhabited islands used as emergency waypoints, while zigzagging bands down the forearm mirrored the currents that could drag a canoe off course. The real genius lay in the tattoo's adaptability. Unlike static paper maps, these living charts could be updated with new markings as navigators discovered fresh routes or refined their understanding of the sea. What made these tattoo maps so extraordinary was their cultural camouflage. European explorers encountering tattooed Polynesians dismissed the body art as primitive decoration, never suspecting the wearers could traverse thousands of miles of open ocean without compasses or sextants. The designs themselves followed strict tapu sacred prohibitions, ensuring only those properly trained could interpret them. Some patterns were so subtle that even within the same community, only a handful of master navigators understood their full meaning. A single spiral on the back might appear decorative, but its precise number of coils could indicate the days needed to reach a distant fishing ground when traveling with a specific lunar phase. The process of encoding this knowledge was as rigorous as modern cartography. Apprentice navigators spent years memorizing star paths and wave patterns before earning their first navigational marks. The tattooing ritual itself was excruciating, using bone chisels and soot-based inks, a physical trial meant to sear the knowledge into both body and mind. Some accounts describe elders reciting chants during the process, matching each tap of the mallet to directional star names or current mnemonics, literally hammering the information into the recipient's consciousness. Modern researchers have identified tantalizing correlations between traditional tattoo motifs and actual Pacific geography. The distinctive chevron patterns common in Marquesan tattoos, for instance, align almost perfectly with the angle of the Southern Cross constellation during key sailing seasons. Other designs mirror the unique shapes of coral heads visible only at certain tides, natural navigation markers invisible to anyone without the inked key. A few surviving tattooed elders in remote atolls can still read these patterns, tracing their fingers along aged ink lines to recall voyages taken decades past, proving the maps remain accurate even as skin sags and fades with time. These living charts represent more than just navigation. They're a testament to humanity's ability to encode complex knowledge in art. Where other cultures built monuments or wrote treatises, Polynesians turned their bodies into libraries, carrying the ocean's secrets wherever they went. The ink may fade, but the knowledge endures. That sometimes the most powerful maps aren't drawn on paper, but written in the language of waves and skin. Across the windswept steppes of the Mongol Empire, where a single rider could vanish into the endless sea of grass, the most secure communications weren't carried in locked chests or sewn into linings. They were woven into the very reins of their horses. These braided horsehair ropes, rough to the touch and weathered by countless miles, seemed like nothing more than practical tack, but hidden within their intricate knots lay hollow channels barely wider than a grain of rice, perfectly sized to hold tightly rolled parchment scrolls. A messenger could ride straight through an enemy camp, his reins inspected by suspicious guards, while imperial orders sat undetected inches from their grasping hands. The system was devastating in its simplicity. Mongol horsemen were famous for their lightweight gear. Carrying bulky message cases would have raised immediate suspicion. But every rider needed reins, and the durable horsehair ropes could withstand weeks of hard travel without fraying. Artisans would carefully braid the strands around a thin reed, then remove it once the pattern was set, leaving a seamless tunnel running the rope's length. Some designs used colored hairs to mark specific compartments. A black strand here might indicate military dispatches, while white signaled personal missives between khans. The scrolls themselves were rolled onto slender bone rods for easy retrieval, their edges waxed to resist sweat and rain. What made these messenger reins so brilliant was their flawless adaptation to Mongol tactics. Scouts riding ahead of the main army could update battle plans in real time, threading fresh intelligence into their tack during brief stops. If captured, they'd appear to be carrying nothing of value. Even under torture, few outsiders would think to unravel something as mundane as horse gear. Historical accounts describe Chinese sentries confiscating Mongol riders' weapons and supplies, only to let them keep their worthless reins as they were marched to prison camps, unaware those very ropes contained escape plans or troop movements. The craftsmanship behind these covert channels was extraordinary. Braiders used specific hair from stallions' tails for its length and resilience, soaked in salt water to prevent stretching. Some surviving examples show subtle variations in weave density, tighter near the ends to conceal openings, looser in the middle to allow scroll insertion. Modern experiments reveal the hollow braids could protect documents even when submerged in rivers or buried in sand for weeks. Perhaps most ingenious was how the system exploited cultural blind spots. To settled civilizations, horsehair was a crude material, unfit for important messages. But for nomads who saw horses as extensions of themselves, hiding words in their mount's very essence was poetic. These reins didn't just carry information, they embodied the Mongol genius for turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, proving that sometimes the strongest bonds between people aren't written on paper, but woven into the threads of daily life. These 28 hidden masterpieces reveal a truth far more fascinating than any treasure hoard. The real genius of the ancient world wasn't just in grand monuments or bloody conquests, but in the quiet art of concealment. Every comb, every coin, every child's toy we've explored carries the fingerprints of minds that refused to be constrained by empires or edicts. They didn't just hide things, they reinvented the very meaning of ordinary objects, turning tea into maps and hairstyles into arsenals. What's truly astonishing isn't just their complexity, but their universality across continents and centuries, from the icy fjords of Scandinavia to the humid jungles of Cambodia. people kept finding eerily similar ways to smuggle knowledge and power right under the noses of those who sought to control them. Consider the patterns that emerge, the hollow talks of Celtic chieftains mirroring the hidden compartments of Ottoman prayer beads, or how both Mayan nobles and Byzantine monks weaponized time itself to coordinate resistance. These parallels suggest something profound about human nature, that oppression often fuels creativity rather than crushing it. When rulers tightened their grip, their subjects didn't just submit, they carved escape routes into candle wax and braided rebellion into horsehair. The most subversive ideas rarely announce themselves with fanfare. They hide in plain sight, whispering through the clatter of dice or the steam of a merchant's teacup. What lingers after examining these devices isn't just admiration for their craftsmanship, but a nagging question: how many more are still waiting to be recognized? Museums worldwide likely harbor undiscovered examples, a broken hairpin with unusual weight distribution, or a decorative belt buckle that clicks open at an odd angle. Even today, archaeologists sometimes revisit old artifacts with new technologies, peeling back layers with spectral imaging or microscopic analysis, only to find secrets that evaded detection for centuries. The Antikythera Mechanism spent 2,000 years dismissed as a corroded lump before revealing its celestial clockwork. How many other lumps on storage shelves hold similar revelations? This is why these stories matter, not just as historical curiosities, but as reminders that the world is always more layered than it appears. The next time you twist a ring absent-mindedly or tap a walking stick against the ground, consider this: every era has its hidden languages, its quiet rebellions encoded in the mundane. The past whispers to us through these objects, not in the shouts of kings and battles, but in the determined ingenuity of those who refuse to let knowledge be extinguished. So tell us, which of these clandestine marvels resonated with you? Was it the Viking Sunstone guiding ships through storms, or the Inca Quipus turning strings into a database? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've enjoyed this journey through history's hidden corners, hit subscribe, because the most extraordinary stories are often the ones tucked between the lines, waiting for curious minds to notice. Stay vigilant, stay questioning, and above all, remember, sometimes history's greatest secrets aren't buried. They're dangling from a belt or steeping in a teacup or right there